Thank you very much, Adrian, for that very concise overview of the issues that we have with regard to building control regulations. We have opt-out inconsistencies in submissions, the speed of the BCMS. I know that's an issue with a lot of people, with everybody, and it's something that we in the National Building Control Office are working on to try and improve, because that's very important. Building control officers are here to assist and promote compliance. The cost of the commencement notice, that is an issue. Sometimes, is the cost, does it compare to what is thought of building control, €30, and hasn't changed over quite a number of years. I'm going to speak to you about the basis and the crux of a commencement notice, why you need a commencement notice, what a commencement notice is for, and the importance of the commencement notices. The basic thing that we do need to decide to realise is that a dynamic economy needs well-trained and well-regulated construction industry, and that's very important for our economic development in this country. We need to deliver quality buildings which are fit for the purpose for people to live in, and it's people we're talking about. People live in buildings, people work in buildings, people study in buildings, people play in buildings. We spend 90% of our time indoors. Vulnerable people spend 100% of their life indoors. Many health problems are either directly or indirectly related to the state of our buildings, and that's a fact. So it is very important that we get our construction right, and that's only the health, safety and welfare. I haven't spoken about the cost of not getting it right first. The biggest problems that we have and that we end up with defects in our buildings is because we haven't put enough emphasis on proper workmanship, proper type of construction, suitable for the circumstances and the conditions for which those buildings are supposed to perform for 50 to 100 years without major intervention. That is the really important thing we need. Sometimes we think, oh, I need to get a roof over my head and I need to do this quickly and I haven't got any money. But we do need to think about how we design and look at our buildings. Proper equipment installed in our buildings, appropriate to the size, design of the individual buildings. What we need is proper air, light, heat, comfort levels. Make sure that we're not have slip, strips, falls, noise, etc. Avoidance of costly retrofitting, very essential. Why does this country need building control? This country does need building control, and that's a picture of the Dublin tenement life in 1939. No electricity, no running water, 7 to a bed. Do we need that? That's the tenement life, 1939. We live differently in our buildings today. At least the countryside, you had a bit of air and you had a bit more space around you during that period. We are building our buildings and we are concentrating our buildings near our centres of high populations. We need air, light, heat, water, health, safety, welfare in or about buildings. They need to be built properly. We can't be having scaffolding up in those new buildings, retrofitting them or remediating mica, pyrite, Part B, fire. It's absolutely crazy to be doing it. We need to actually have people that can have trust in the building industry, that they can buy or purchase or rent a home or a building or an office that will be fit for their needs and amenable to a safe and healthy occupation. We've seen all of this, pyrite defects in apartments, mica, all of the other issues. Confidence in the building industry is very important. Confidence in our building control officers, confidence in building control, our regulators, that we are out there, that we are inspecting, that we are doing our work properly, that we are ensuring that what comes into us is designed properly and fit to be constructed in the circumstances and the conditions. Who's responsible? We have the owner, the designer, the builder. This is our building control legislative framework, and everybody knows about this, and we have the Building Control Acts. And guess what? We've had them since 1990. We've changed over the years. We haven't asked for anything other than compliance with the building regulations, the design and construction of buildings. We've asked for health, safety, welfare in or about buildings. So this is not something new that happened in 2014. We also have building control officers have functions around energy performance in buildings regulations and the construction products regulations. Section 3 of the Building Control Act provides for the design and construction of buildings, and these are called the Building Regulations Part 8M, making provisions for health, safety, welfare of people in or about buildings. All civilized societies have regulations for the purpose of protecting the environment and the health and safety of the citizen, and the building regulations are no different, and we've had those since 1990. Section 6 then provides for the control mechanisms, and the control mechanisms are the controls that ask the citizen to demonstrate how they're going to comply with the design and the construction requirements of buildings. And the control mechanisms provides for procedure, administration, control for the purpose of securing implementation of and compliance with the requirements of the building regulations and the building control regulations. It's not just, oh, all this paperwork in the BCMS, I have to put this in. No, this is not about paperwork in the BCMS. This is about the owner, the builder, the designer having the proper designs carried out in advance of commencement, and then submitting that to the Building Control Authority to state that they have carried out their due diligence and prepared properly. So today we're going to talk about notices to commence. And the notices to commence are provided for under Section 6K of the Building Control Act, and that requires the giving of notice to building control authorities for the erection of such buildings or classes of buildings or carrying out of such works or classes of works as may be specified in the regulations. And that's been there for quite a considerable time too. So it's notice to the Building Control Authority that you're going to carry out some buildings or works. The Building Control Authority knows where that you're going to carry it out, and it gives them the opportunity to look at that submission, your commencement notice, and decide if they need to inspect it. That's just a reminder slide, and basically all that says is that Part A to M of the building regulations must be complied with in all buildings and works in such a way as there's no newer or greater contravention to any of the parts, and all of them must be complied with. You can't just say, oh, I've complied with Part M access, now I can't really get my Part K right. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, J, K, L, and M must be complied with. That's the reality. They are functional requirements. How you comply with them is left to the designer and the owner, and that allows for a lot of innovation. As I've said, builder is responsible for building in compliance with the building regulations, the designer is responsible for designing in compliance with the building regulations, the owner is responsible to ensure that what they carry out or initiate is or present is designed and constructed in accordance with the building regulations. If an owner decides that they're going to be the builder and the designer, they must ensure they're competent. If they decide, I don't want an expensive registered architect or chartered engineer or surveyor, I'm going to do this myself, building is simple, they must ensure that they understand the full requirements of A2M of the building regulations. And that is something that owners and those who start buildings or commence buildings need to think about. Think about, are they competent to do that? And if they're not competent, they shouldn't be doing it. Would they wire their house? No, they wouldn't. They need to think about in the future, what are the insurance implications of this, and will they have good marketable title? Building control officers are not responsible for compliance with the building regulations. They have functions under the Building Control Act, and they shall administer the controls, the notices, the applications, and the certificates. And they may enforce, and they may inspect, and they may take legal proceedings, but they shall maintain a statutory building control register, and they may provide for the requirements of the construction products regulations and the European Energy Performance of Buildings regulations. So owner, designer, builder have full responsibility. They're two very good documents that anybody building a house or an extension should read. The Code of Practice for Inspecting and Certifying Buildings and Works, it's best practice for owners, designers, builders, design certifiers. the framework for building control authorities, it outlines the roles and duties of the building control officer. As I said, Section 6 provides for the controls, and the controls are the notices to commence, the applications for fire safety certificates, disability access certificates, dispensations, relaxations, and then the certificates of compliance on completion, your fire safety certificate. But today I'm just going to talk about commencement notices. The commencement notice is a notice to commence, to give to the Building Control Authority notice that you're going to erect a building or works. It's a plan of what you're going to do. It gives the Building Control Authority all the details of what I'm going to build, where, and who's going to do what, who's going to be the owner, the designer. You need to actually decide you're building something. Most buildings are built for 50 to 100 years. You spend 3/4 of your income, if it's your home, for 3/4 of your life. And to actually submit a commencement notice without proper planning, without proper design, is a mug's game. You need designers, you need builders, you need subcontractors, you need teamwork, you need to have all of that decided at the very beginning when you're looking at your commencement notice. And anybody that does otherwise, really, they should think again. So compliance with the building regulations is all, and you need to plan before you submit a commencement notice. Commencement notice is not just, opening up the BCMS and getting somebody, fill up that old form for me there, I need to start this. That's the wrong way to think about homes. And then come back then if something happens and the taxpayer pays for it. Commencement notice, as I said, is required for section in the Building Control Act. Give notice to the Building Control Authority within 14 to 28 days. So you're giving notice, building control is 14 to 28 days. There should be months of planning before anybody would actually complete a commencement notice. The building control management system, which we've said is a little bit slow at the moment and we're working on, and we apologise for that, is prescribed in legislation as the preferred means of administration of building control in Ireland. And it's administration of building control. It's the procedure, administration and control in how you're securing compliance with the requirements of Part A to M of the building regulations. So that's the way you need to think about it, how you're securing compliance. Basically, there's 4 types of commencement notices. We have the 7-day notice as a commencement notice to commence without having a valid fire safety certificate in place. You have the commencement notice where you have your professional designers, your professional science certifiers, your professional inspectors. Then you have the opt-out, which Adrian has alluded to, which I totally agree with him, where you're only opting out of employing a professional to build your building. Like, think about it. I don't want a professional to build my building. I'm going to do it myself, or I'll get the guy down the road or the girl down the road to do it. But you still must comply with the requirements of the building regulations, and you still must sign and say, I'm competent to do this. So that's really commencement notice. You need details, description of your project, you need location of your project, you need general arrangement drawings, you need the name and address of the builder, the owner, the designer, you need to complete an online assessment of your approach to compliance with building regulations, you need to complete a schedule of documents which I have designed in advance and which I will be designing and updating during the course of the construction, and I'll have available that to the Building Control Authority. Every project should have some form of quality assurance in the form of some form of inspections, whether mandatory or not mandatory. It's a fool's game not to. And then there's payment of the €30 fee, which Adrian has alluded to. Basically, that's what the commencement notice says. I give notice, I'm going to do this, I'm going to build a building. There's the owner's name, and the owner is the person on whom the building controller, who has legal entitlement to carry out the works, and whom the Building Control Authority may ask or may take enforcement if there is a non-compliance. You pay your €30 fee, and it's €30 per building. You need to describe what you're doing. And what we have seen in a lot of commencement notices, people come, they cut and paste what they've applied for planning for, and they paste it in to the commencement notice. Wrong. You need to explain to us, is it an extension? Is it a new building? Is it a material alteration? Is it a material change of use? What's the class of building? Is it a dwelling? Is it a shop? Is it a commercial unit? Is it an agricultural building? What's the composition? Has it 2-story, 3-story, 5-bay, 1.5-story? Type of construction needs to be explained. That should be all in the description. So proper descriptions are very important. And there's an example of a description. And for anybody that's submitting a commencement notice, they should actually have their description written like that. Not a cut and paste from your planning. Cut and paste from your planning will get that notice set to revised and be sent back because it's not a proper description of what you're going to be doing. Location of the development, very important to get the location of the development correct. The Building Control Authority need to know the location. In the BCMS, we have the air code, we have a search by air code, we have a longitude and latitude, and you can put in your air code finder, you can find your air code, you can click on the map, but you must double check in the BCMS to see that the air code you put in matches your address. If you can't do that and you're not quite sure it's right, submit with your commencement notice in the supporting documents a site location map outlined in red with the location. Very important. If you don't do that, you will get your notice set to revised. Planning permission, if required, must be on it. The date granted must be on it, the date expiry. The fire safety certificate, if required. The disability access certificate. All of this you must check. So there's a lot of work that needs to go in advance to a commencement notice. The number of buildings, If I'm building a single detached unit in the countryside, that's one building. If I'm building a multi-unit apartment block with 25 apartments in a building, that's one building. Number of new buildings. If I'm building a new dwelling, it's one new building. If I'm putting an extension on it, it's not a new building. The use of the building must be defined correctly and checked. In the commencement notice, where you have residential development, you need to look at the phases. And these are figures that the department collect, so they need to be absolutely correct. And only include in the commencement notice the works or the phases that the number that you're actually going to complete, that's the subject of this commencement notice. Not what you're going to do next year or the year after. And you need to think about that. If you sell off a phase during the course of that commencement notice, you need to rethink how I'm going to complete this and go into your local authority, and maybe you might need a new commencement notice or you need a change of role. Total number of phases you need to put in. Phasing is not relevant for single houses. And then you need to note the number of phases which are multi-unit. This is a very important part of the notice for multi-unit developments, and it's not, we find as building control officers, considering the validation of commencement notice, this is rarely completed correctly and has to be set to revised. If in doubt, pick up the phone, have a meeting with your building control officer. Total number of phases, the number of units in each phase, the commencement date for each phase. That's very important because we need to know the commencement date for each phase and the proposed end date for each phase. If that's going to change, you should really notify your building control officer so that we can have those figures. Builder, as I said, means competent. You need the name and address of your builder, you need the name and address of your designer details, and all of these people must be competent. This is the really important part that people seem to forget. Question 6. What does question 6 say? It says, have I got submission of documents? A schedule of documents accompanying this commencement notice is attached in the following format. And that schedule of documents is to tell the building control officer what documents you have designed and what documents you're going to design, plans, specifications, and particulars. And what you need to think, this just didn't appear into the commencement notice in 2014. 97, they asked for the drainage system foundations, the persons, the information, the person whom this information can be got from, the building control officer can ask for. 2004, we asked for the same thing. 2009 was the same. 2014. So again, this hasn't changed. And why are we not seeing this as automatic submission with the commencement notice? Question 6. This is something that our office will be insisting on and asking all the building control officers in the 31 building control authorities to actually invalidate it or set it to revised until this is there, until this is completed. You need to plan, you need to have your drawings done, you need to have your design. Document, reference number, description. What is designed? You don't have to submit them, but they must be available if the building control officers ask for. Every single commencement notice requires that. Every single commencement notice requires a general arrangement drawing. And Richard will be talking about the general arrangement drawing later. Every single commencement notice requires the completion of an online assessment. Doesn't matter whether it's opt-out, doesn't matter whether it's SI9 or 7-day notice. You need question 6, all your drawings that are designed, your general arrangement drawings, and your completion of an online assessment. And I'm not going to go into that because Ronan will be looking at that later. So what is the purpose again? And I can't repeat it enough. The purpose of your commencement notice, give notice to the Building Control Authority you're going to commence this project. And these are all my documentation. These are my builder, they're all competent, and this is the documentation to show how I am going to comply with Part 8M of the building regulations. Construction products, very important part, are the products that I'm using fit for the purpose, Part E. So as I said, every commencement notice, online assessment, submission of your documents, and a general arrangement drawings. That's just an example of what should be included in general arrangement drawings. I will not go into it, but you should have your energy assessment carried out, because how are you going to know what materials to use if you haven't got that calculation done in advance? Your provisional BER, your foundation details, your site assessment, your investigations. You need to know the materials you're using, the foundations, the drainage, all of that. Like, how does anybody start a building without all of this? It's beyond me. Your building needs to be fit for purpose, 50 to 100 years. That's just an example, as I said, of a general arrangement drawing. Richard will be talking about that later. And in my presentation, I will put links to the general arrangement drawings in that. What we need to see as part of your general arrangement drawings is that you know what SR16, the aggregates for concrete. Every building that I've ever been in has concrete in it somewhere. So you need to ensure that the aggregates are to SR16. SR17, every building has a road up to it or paths around it. SR21, every building has a floor, and under your floor should be SR21 material. So you shouldn't start a building unless you're aware that you should have knowledge of this. SR18, what do we need SR18 for? We need SR18 aggregates for mortar. Render, your outside render to keep the rain out, the coat on the building to keep the rain and the weather out needs to be to SR18. SR325, everybody building a masonry building in this country should have read SR325. It's the recommendations for the design of masonry structures in Ireland to Eurocode 6. So if you're designing a block, aggregate concrete block building, you need to have it designed to SR325. Many ways to comply: codes of practice, standard recommendations, acceptable construction details, agreement certifications, alternative national. And we should be able to see this on your general arrangement drawings and your specifications. That come in with your commencement notice. Plenty of guidance for people that are doing dwellings. The department has all of these on their website: building standards, installation, commissioning, ventilation systems, the Part B, supplementary guidance to design of stairs. All of that is there, and we should be seeing. There's practice notes from the professions that can be used, ancillary certificates for your subcontractors. It's all there, but again, you need to plan properly in advance. It's not just opening the BCMS and filling boxes. We're not accepting that. It's too important. It doesn't matter whether you have a commencement notice with an opt-out declaration or a commencement notice under SI 9 of 2014 or a 7-day notice. You need all of that. This, not good enough. They will be sent back. Signatures, descriptions, NA, written in your commencement notice in an online submission. It's not an online submission. Reasons, I've just put up there reasons that commencement notices have been invalidated. The description doesn't describe the complexity, or it doesn't adequately describe the project. The type of notice is not correct. Sometimes people submit an opt-out where they should have submitted a commencement notice with supporting compliance documentation. Sometimes people submit a commencement notice for an entrance gate or walls or piers. You don't need a commencement notice for that. The description is the biggest problem. It's inadequate to enable validation. It doesn't make any sense. And we have a lot of those that make no sense. The wrong planning reference, fire safety reference numbers. Question 6, the schedule of such plans, calculations, specifications, particulars as are currently designed or prepared. It's not there at all. It's left blank. So that's not a completed commencement notice. These are not reasons to invalidate if you haven't commenced your commencement notice within 14 to 28 days. It just withers. It's just gone. Planning permission is not a reason to invalidate. Ground floor bathroom doesn't comply with Part M. It's not a technical assessment. It's a consideration to show that you have all your documents are in accordance with Article 9 of the building regulations. You must file it electronically with the building control management system. Plans, calculations. Planning is everything with a commencement notice. You're building a very expensive building. You wouldn't buy a car without doing a lot of research and planning and reading up on it. You hardly would buy a kettle, but why would you submit a commencement notice without having all of your design work done? And this is sometimes, it takes too long, it takes less time, but to do things right than to explain why you did it wrong. The thing we get is, oh, building control, or the cost of building control, oh, I haven't time to do this, and you have to do all these expensive drawings and specifications and calculations. But why wouldn't you do them? You wouldn't design a car without having your blueprint. Why would you build a house without having your blueprint? Building materials have got very much more complex. Building is much more complex. You do need professionals to build these buildings. The problem is that when they go wrong, it's all of us pay for it. It's the taxpayer that pays for it, all of us. It's money out of our pockets that we could be putting into education. We could be putting into playgrounds. We could be putting into other things than rebuilding buildings that should have been built correctly the first day. So the commencement notice is the very important document that needs to be completed absolutely properly, and the building must last at least 60 to 100 years. And I can't emphasize that enough. Fit for purpose is all, and thank you very much.